The great royal court of planet Xythera was filled with shining crystal pillars and floating lights. Alien nobles in long silver robes stood around, whispering to each other. In the center of the hall stood three sisters, Lyra, Ceres, and Vera. They were the pride of Xythera, tall, graceful, and feared for their sharp tongues. Before them stood a lone human, Captain Elias Kane. His black uniform was simple. His boots were dusty from travel. He looked small next to the tall alien guards, but he stood straight, his eyes calm. The sisters circled him like hunters around prey. Lyra laughed first. "Is this the famous human?" she said. "I thought they would send someone strong, not soft." Ceres tilted her head, her long blue hair shining under the light. "Look at his skin, no scales, no armor. How does he survive in battle? Does he hide behind walls?" Vera smirked. "Humans must be very slow. I heard they take whole seconds to think." The nobles around them laughed. Some covered their mouths. Others stared openly, waiting for the human to break under shame. But Captain Kane only smiled. Not a weak smile, but the kind that makes people uncomfortable, like he knew something they didn't. The sisters kept mocking him, throwing insult after insult, but Kane never spoke. His silence made them even bolder. Then, a deep voice echoed through the court. "Enough!" Every head turned. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single black stone, sat the king of Xythera. His golden crown caught the light like fire. His eyes were sharp and unreadable. He rose from his throne, each step heavy and slow, until he stood between the human and the sisters. "You three," he said, pointing at Lyra, Ceres, and Vera. "Mock a man who has saved more lives than you can imagine." The sisters exchanged quick glances but said nothing. The king's voice became even louder. "If you think humans are so weak, then you shall marry this one." Gasps filled the hall. Some nobles stepped back in shock. The sisters froze. Lyra's mouth opened, but no words came. Ceres looked at her father like he had gone mad. Vera shook her head, trying to laugh, but it came out nervous. "Father, you cannot be serious," Ceres finally said. "I am very serious," the king replied. "You will wed him, or leave Xythera forever." The sisters stared at the human, expecting him to be shocked, but Kane's calm smile did not change. In fact, it grew sharper. "I accept," Kane said quietly, "but only if they can survive 1 week with me." The sisters blinked. Survive? What did that mean? The king nodded, as if this was exactly what he wanted. "So be it. 1 week. If you fail, the choice will be mine." The sisters felt a strange chill. For the first time, it seemed the human was not prey at all. The royal court emptied slowly, but whispers followed the sisters everywhere. Some nobles laughed quietly. Others looked at them with pity. The sisters walked fast, their steps echoing in the long crystal hallway. Captain Kane followed a few steps behind, silent as a shadow. When they reached the private chamber, the king was already there. He stood by the window, looking out over the silver towers of Xythera City. "Father," Lyra began, her voice sharp, "this is a joke, yes?" The king turned. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "No, this is justice." Ceres crossed her arms. "Justice for what? We only spoke the truth. Humans are weak." The king's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You call him weak? That man saved the Xytheran fleet from complete destruction." The sisters frowned, unsure if they had heard right. Vera raised an eyebrow. "One human saved our fleet? Impossible." The king stepped closer, his tone cold. 5 cycles ago, the Drath Imperium ambushed our ships near the Void Rift. The fleet was lost except for one small human warship. Kane's ship. He outmaneuvered the enemy, destroyed their lead cruiser, and gave us a path to escape. Without him, you would not be standing here today. The room fell silent, but Lyra still tried to laugh. "So he's clever. That doesn't make him worthy of." The king slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You will live with him for 1 week. If you return, you will marry him. If you refuse, you will be exiled." No titles, no power, no home. The sisters stared in shock. They were not used to their father's voice sounding like this. Cain finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I have no interest in forcing anyone. But if they truly believe I am nothing, then let them walk in my world for 7 days. Survive what I survive. See what I see. Then judge. There was a dangerous calm in his words, something that made even the sisters' pride falter. The king nodded slowly. Tomorrow morning, you will leave with Captain Cain aboard his ship. Your comfort will be his choice. Your safety will depend on your own skill. Ceres's stomach twisted. What do you mean by that? The king only smiled, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. You will understand soon enough. Cain gave a small bow. I will see you at dawn. Without waiting for permission, he turned and walked away. The sisters looked at each other. For the first time, none of them were laughing. The next morning, the sky over Xythera city was a deep violet, lit by the rising twin suns. The sisters stood on the palace landing platform, wearing travel cloaks. Each carried a small silver case with only the things they thought they might need. The air shimmered as a dark, heavy ship descended from the clouds. Its hull was black steel, scarred with deep burns and dents from many battles. It landed with a deep, rumbling hiss. The sisters had expected something more beautiful, perhaps polished metal and smooth curves like Xytheran ships. But Cain's vessel looked dangerous, like it was built for survival, not for show. The side hatch opened, and Captain Cain stepped out. He was in the same black uniform, his eyes calm and unreadable. Welcome to the Iron Resolve, he said. Step aboard. The sisters exchanged looks, then followed him inside. The air was different, colder, filled with the faint smell of metal and engine oil. The corridors were narrow, the walls scratched and patched in places. Lyra wrinkled her nose. This is primitive. Cain glanced at her but said nothing. He led them to a small room with 3 simple bunks and a metal table. This is your cabin. You will eat, sleep, and work from here. Ceres frowned. Work? Yes, Cain said. Every crew member works. You'll help with ship maintenance, food preparation, and weapons checks. Vera laughed. We are royal daughters. We don't do cleaning. Cain didn't smile. Then you might not last the week. Before they could answer, a sharp alarm rang through the ship. Red lights flashed across the corridor. Battle stations, Cain said, his voice suddenly sharp. Stay close. The sisters followed him to the command deck, where holographic screens showed a fast-approaching vessel. It was long, jagged, and painted with the black and red markings of the Void Belt Raiders, a pirate faction known for taking no prisoners. They're hailing us, Cain said, tapping the controls. A pirate's face appeared on the screen. Pale skin, metal teeth, and eyes full of cruelty. Human, the pirate growled. Leave the sisters with us, and maybe we'll let you live. Lyra gasped. They want us. Cain didn't look at her. His hands moved over the controls with calm precision. Strap in, he said. You're about to see what primitive can do. The Iron Resolve's engines roared, and the ship shot forward. The sisters were thrown back in their seats as Cain dove into a dangerous roll. Beams of energy cut across space, missing by only meters. The pirates were closing in, but Cain's eyes stayed locked on the screens, his expression like stone. The sisters felt fear for the first time in years. And then Cain said, in a voice like cold steel, Hold on. I'm ending this in one move. The Iron Resolve spun sharply, the stars outside turning into blurs of light. The sisters gripped their seats, their hearts pounding. Cain's fingers moved quickly over the controls, his eyes scanning every reading. The pirate ship fired again. A beam of red energy streaked past the Iron Resolve, close enough to rattle the hull. They're faster than us, Ceres shouted. Cain didn't look away from the screen. They're faster, but I'm smarter. He pulled the ship into a sudden dive, skimming dangerously close to an asteroid field. Chunks of rock tumbled slowly through the void, spinning like silent giants. The sisters stared at the huge stones, each one big enough to crush the ship with a single hit. "You're insane," Vera shouted. "Maybe," Kane said calmly, "but so are they, and I'm counting on it." The pirates followed, firing wildly. Their shots missed as Kane weaved through the deadly rocks. The iron resolve scraped past one massive asteroid, sparks flashing across the hull. Lyra closed her eyes, sure they would crash at any second. Then Kane's voice cut through the tension. "Locking target." A sudden alarm blared. The pirates had locked weapons on them. But before they could fire, Kane spun the ship, flipping it upside down in space. For a heartbeat, everything outside was a blur of rock and light. Then Kane fired. The Iron Resolve's cannons sent 2 blazing shots straight into a massive asteroid. The rock split apart in a slow, silent explosion, its shards spinning out like knives. The pirate ship didn't have time to react. The debris smashed into its hull, tearing through its engines. In seconds, the raiders were drifting, dead in space. The sisters stared at the view screen in shock. Kane had not only survived, he had turned the asteroid field into a weapon. But then the ship's console began to beep urgently. Kane glanced down, his calm expression finally shifting to something darker. "Impact on our port side," he said. "We took a hit before the debris took them out. Hull breach in Section 4. The sisters didn't understand. Not until the ship's lights flickered and the air grew colder. Kane unstrapped himself. "Stay here," he ordered. "And whatever happens, don't open that door." "Wait," Lyra called after him, but he was already gone, running into the smoke-filled corridor. The sisters looked at each other, the alarms screaming around them. Somewhere deep inside the ship, metal groaned and something heavy crashed. And then the sound stopped. The silence felt worse than the battle. The alarm still echoed through the Iron Resolve, but the sisters could hear something else now, the faint sound of boots on metal. "Do we go after him?" Saris asked, gripping the arm of her seat. Lyra hesitated. "He said stay." Vera shook her head. "If the hull is broken, staying here won't matter. We'll all be dead." Before they could argue more, the hatch to the command deck hissed open. Kane stepped through, his uniform torn, blood on his sleeve. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes were steady. The sisters jumped to their feet. "You're bleeding," Lyra said, almost by instinct. "It's just a scratch," Kane replied. He moved to the control panel, fingers dancing over the keys. Hull breach sealed. Life support stable again. The sisters looked at him differently now. There had been no guards, no soldiers to protect him. He had gone alone into the damaged part of the ship and fixed it himself, while injured. As the tension in the air eased, Kane sat down in the captain's chair and pulled off his glove. The sisters noticed his hand, scarred, some fingers bearing faint burn marks, others with the rough edges of healed cuts. "Your hand," Saris said softly. Kane glanced at it, then shrugged. "Every mark tells a story." He tapped a screen, pulling up a hollow image. It showed a massive alien warship, bigger than anything the sisters had ever seen, surrounded by smaller ships. "That's the Drath Imperium's flagship," Kane said. "5 cycles ago, they were hunting your fleet near the Void Rift. Your ships were faster, but they panicked. They scattered. The Drath closed in." The sisters leaned closer. "My crew and we were the only ones close enough to intercept. We hit their lead cruiser, took out their targeting array. That gave your father's fleet the chance to run." Kane paused. "We lost half our crew that day." The sisters didn't know what to say. For the first time, they saw not just a human, but a soldier, a survivor, someone who had paid a price they'd never imagined. "You fought for us," Lyra said quietly. "I fight for anyone who needs it," Kane answered. "But the Drath, they don't give up. And if they know you're with me, they'll come again." The ship's console beeped. A soft, almost polite sound that somehow felt worse than the alarms. Kane's eyes narrowed. "They're already here." The sisters felt the fear return. But this time, it wasn't just fear for themselves. The Iron Resolve floated in the cold dark, its lights dimmed to hide from scanners. The sisters stood behind Kane, staring at the screen. A massive shadow moved in the distance, larger than any ship they had seen before. It was the Drath Imperium's dreadnought. Its black hull looked like it was carved from a single block of night. Rows of weapon ports glowed faint red. Small escort ships circled it like predators around a kill. Saris whispered, "That thing could destroy a city in one shot." Kane's voice was calm. "It could destroy a planet in 5. The dreadnought broadcast a message. The image of a Drath warlord filled the screen. Skin like cracked stone, eyes burning like molten gold. "Human," the warlord growled. "Hand over the Xytheran royals, and I might spare your life." Lyra stepped forward. "We are not yours to take." The warlord's lips curled into something like a smile. "You think your words matter, little one? You are bait, and the human is the prey." The signal cut. Kane's hands moved over the controls. "We can't outrun them, so we outthink them." He pulled up a 3D map of the sector. "There's an old mining station here, abandoned for decades. We'll hide there, but not quietly. We'll turn it into a trap." The sisters exchanged nervous looks. "Trap?" Vera asked. Kane explained quickly. Using the station's unstable fuel cells and leftover mining charges, he could set off a chain reaction that would cripple the dreadnought, but only if the Drath followed them inside. "We'll be in range of their guns the whole time," Sarah said. "Yes," Kane replied simply. "That's the fun part." The iron resolve darted toward the mining station. The Drath ships followed, weapons flashing. Each hit made the hull shudder, but Kane's hands never hesitated. Inside the dusty, silent station, Kane and the sisters worked fast. Lyra and Saris carried the heavy charges, while Vera followed Kane's instructions to reroute power through ancient, half-broken systems. "Why are you helping us?" Lyra asked as they worked. Kane didn't look up. "Because if I don't, no one else will." The Drath dreadnought closed in, blocking the station's only exit. Kane triggered the final sequence. The charges armed. In 30 seconds, Kane said, "This place will light up the sky. Time to leave." They raced back to the iron resolve, engines screaming as the countdown ticked. Through the view screen, they saw the dreadnought moving closer, too close. "Now," Kane whispered, hitting the detonator. A silent flash lit the void. The shockwave hit the dreadnought first, ripping through its hull. Fire blossomed in the dark. Its escorts scattered. The sisters gasped. Kane had done it. But then a new signal appeared on the screen. The Drath warlord, alive, his face filled with rage. "I will take the human alive." The iron resolve limped back to Xythera's royal landing platform, its hull marked with fresh burns and new scars. The twin suns were just setting, painting the sky gold and crimson. The sisters stepped out first, their cloaks torn, their faces marked with soot and dust. Kane followed, moving slower than usual, one hand pressed against a bandaged wound on his side. The royal court had gathered to see them return. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some were shocked the sisters had survived. Others stared at Kane, wondering how a human could come back alive from a Drath encounter. The king rose from his throne as they approached. "Well?" he asked, his voice echoing across the platform. "Do you still mock this man? Or will you honor the promise you made?" The sisters looked at one another. Their pride, once so sharp, had been burned away in the fire of battle. They remembered Kane repairing the ship under fire, guiding them through the asteroid field, and standing between them and the Drath. Lyra stepped forward. "We will marry him, not because of your order, but because he has earned our respect." Saris nodded. "He is braver than any warrior we've met." Vera added softly, "And he does not fight for glory. He fights because it's right." The king's eyes softened for a moment, but his face remained stern. "So it is decided." Kane, however, shook his head. "No," the crowd gasped. The sisters turned to him in surprise. "I will not marry anyone because of duty or politics," Kane said. "If they wish to join me, they will do it because they choose me, not because of a week's challenge." Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. "Then we choose you." For the first time, Kane's calm broke into a genuine grin. The king stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Kane could hear. This was my plan from the start. They needed to see the truth. And so did you. Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. You're a dangerous man, your majesty. The king smirked. So are you, Captain. As the suns dipped below the horizon, the crowd erupted into cheers. The sisters stood beside Kane, not as mockers, but as equals, and perhaps something more. Far above, in the dark of space, a single Drath scout ship drifted silently, its sensors locked on Xythera. In its shadowed cockpit, the warlord's molten eyes burned with cold patience. This isn't over, he whispered.